The 4080 Super is a very fast GPU. I mean, this thing blew my socks off running with it, which is exactly why people have been so excited about this thing.
That is the one that people in our comments appeared to be the most excited about.
Is basically a $200 discount off of the original 4080, but it's giving you about the same performance. That really leads to the real question: is a $1,000 GPU ever worth it? What does $1,000 actually allow you to do? And how much more for the rest of your system do you have to pay in order to fully utilize the capabilities of a $1,000 graphics card? I will tell you one thing for certain though, when you get this graphics card, it feels like a $1,000 graphics card.
Oh my god, this thing is so big. Look how big that is. What? It's so big.
Because it is a freaking brick. A freaking brick. This thing is huge. And it looks comically large against an RTX 4070. 4K is the biggest advantage. Paying this much for a GPU actually does push you over the edge in a lot of cases of what playable will be at 4K compared to GPUs that cost a lot less than it. For example, against the $500 RX 7800 XT, so this card is half the price of the 4080 Super, you can play Last of Us Part 1 at 4K native at ultra settings, getting 71 average FPS, whereas on the 7800 XT, you're getting under 60. Actually, a decent amount under 60. Well, this might be a weird pairing you might think between these cards, but what are you really getting if you're paying this much for a card? Jusant is a lighter Unreal Engine 5 title, and you can get about 74 average FPS on the at 4K native high settings, which is basically max in this game. This game uses Nanite and Lumen, and you can do that on the 4080 Super, whereas on the 7800 XT, you're at about an average of 52. You can play Cyberpunk at 4K native high settings without ray tracing on the 4080 Super, whereas that isn't really available to you on the 7800 XT at like 52 average FPS. And the list just kind of goes on with this. There's so many games where the 4080 Super pushes you above that threshold that it actually matters. And if you compare it also to a $600 graphics card from NVIDIA, the 4070 Super, well, you get pretty much the same story. The 4080 Super allows you to play things natively at 4K, and sometimes at ultra or high settings, at least that's what I tested these games at, you still get playable levels of performance, which definitely matters. Although this isn't true in every single case, like in a game like Alan Wake 2, it's still very demanding even at 4K on the 4080 Super. But because this card is faster, it means you don't have to use as much upscaling as you would on these slightly slower cards. Obviously though, you have to pay for these capabilities on the 4080 Super. I mean, it's $1,000, or if you want to min-max this, you could hit that like maybe the nicer middle ground where you could get NVIDIA's own RTX 4070 Ti Super, which I did a review on if you do want to check that out. That card is $800, and a lot of the times it gets you pretty close to the 4080 Super. It's not like the same card or anything, but it's in a range where it might not matter a whole lot. And then there's AMD's $720 currently RX 7900 XT with 20 gigabytes of VRAM, actually more VRAM than the 4080 Super is packing. And this card is surprisingly very fast for how much less it costs in the 4080 Super. It goes toe to toe with it in a lot of games. I mean, seriously, at 4K, usually the 4080 Super is only a few percentage points ahead of the 7900 XT. And that's very impressive from a GPU that costs 28% less than the 4080 Super and is packing more VRAM, as I just said. Although that isn't always the case with ray tracing, and that's kind of the same story I've heard all the time. AMD isn't as strong at ray tracing as NVIDIA because the 4080 Super is actually a really, really good 1440p ray tracing card. I do say 1440p, and that sounds a little contradictory to the 4K point before, because even on this $1,000 graphics card, you have to use a lot of upscaling that I wouldn't really call it a 4K RT card. Most of the time though, you can get playable or actually very good FPS at 1440p with ray tracing on, and that just isn't the case with a card like the 4070 Super at $600. And you have to use more upscaling on the 4070 Super, or even frame generation in some cases to try to make up that gap. Then there's also the $800 4070 Ti Super, also by NVIDIA. And yeah, this card obviously, I mean, it costs less than the 4080 Super, it's in the same generation. It obviously got bested by the 4080 Super, you would expect that. However, in a lot of games here, I don't see that $800 to $1,000 price jump really that worth it or a deal breaker on the 4070 Ti Super. And it's the same old story with the typically, you would think, better priced AMD cards, because the 7800 XT with ray tracing on, I mean, this card gets destroyed. We saw the 7900 XT, you know, bumping heads with the 4080 Super in a lot of games. When you turn ray tracing on, yeah, it's a bloodbath for the 7900 XT. However, though, as it's been shown a lot in the past, there are lighter ray tracing titles that don't take full advantage of the NVIDIA hardware, and AMD cards can still hang in games like that. So if you aren't playing like the Alan Wakes or Cyberpunks or Avatar's Frontiers of Pandora type of games, then honestly, you can probably play without ray tracing or very little ray tracing to have a good experience on AMD cards. The thing about ray tracing though, on the 4080 Super is like, does it actually matter? Because there's two main things with ray tracing that you need in order to make it useful. Number one is the raw power of the card that you're using to be able to use it at all. 4080 Super actually does have that kind of performance in order to do that, but obviously you're paying for that performance. And then the second thing is you have to also be the one to want to buy and play the games that have or utilize ray tracing. Usually this is some of the latest titles that are out there. Not everybody's always playing the latest games or even wanting to turn ray tracing on in games, because it does do a lot of performance hit, and is the visual trade-off even worth it using ray tracing in these games? So you have to be able to one, afford the graphics card in order to play with ray tracing, but also afford the games that are actually using ray tracing. This whole thing makes the RTX 4080 Super at $1,000 pretty niche. Don't get me wrong here. Like the 4080 Super, it's extremely fast. The amount of performance that this card has on tap is just extremely impressive. And it finally competes head-to-head for price to performance and stuff with the AMD's currently $950 RX 7900 XTX that, you know, started out at $1,000. And it's really fun to just see the 4080 Super just absolutely rip and go crazy in games. It is just pumping out so much FPS, and the geek in me absolutely loves this thing. But we got to be realistic with the 4080 Super. The main advantages of this $1,000 GPU in gaming is 4K, for one. And I know most people out there are actually on 1080p. Obviously, if you're buying a $1,000 graphics card, you're probably not gaming at 1080p. But 1440p is growing the fastest in terms of resolution and is becoming the most mainstream, whereas 4K, where this card does excel at, isn't as popular. So that makes the 4080 Super just more niche by comparison. Plus, the cost of 4K monitors, I mean, it's just added on more cost to the actual system in order to utilize this card to its fullest potential. Then I also explained just how niche and expensive ray tracing can be in a lot of games. So there's so many like added costs to a $1,000 graphics card, which is already expensive, because the monitors, the games, the rest of the computer that you're playing this card on, like, it just makes the 4080 Super like extremely niche, because it prices out so many people that would maybe be interested in buying it. There is possibly a pretty small niche that this 4080 Super would be a pretty solid option for in the gaming audience. Then again, a lot of the people that are spending that much on their systems and stuff like that might already jump up to the RTX 4090 anyways. So, but the actual worst thing about this card is not really the price, but I mean, it's kind of the price, but just it's actually how it's got people thinking about this.
The 4080 Super, that is the one that people in our comments appeared to be the most excited about, or at least discussing the most, when it was all announced in NVIDIA's news coverage. That's because it comes down to $1,000 from $1,200 for baseline. And that should be, in theory, a pretty significant shift for value. We'll see how it plays out.
That people have actually been excited for a $200 price cut on the RTX 4080, which was originally very depressing at $1,200. I mean, that card costed $500 more than its predecessor, the RTX 3080, or what's supposed to be a predecessor. We don't even know anymore at this point. Now they cut that price and it's still $1,000. That's still $300 more than the RTX 3080 was back in 2020. I know that 3080 never really went for that price, but still. And it's how that kind of price increase in one generation of graphics card is being normalized. Or are we just gonna take, like, people are getting excited for a $1,000 GPU that used to cost $700? I don't really see the pricing like realistically getting any better for these GPUs, and the 4080 Super is just like the billboard poster child of this kind of reality that we're in. And I think the only reason that NVIDIA basically did a price cut on the RTX 4080 at $1,200, it's because they priced that card too high, and then they had to cut it down with a 4080 Super. One other angle to look at the RTX 4080 Super at $1,000, it's like, well, this graphics card, it could be used for creative work. I know the creators out there might be very excited about this card. It's like you're getting tons of performance. And in video editing, I did some tests, and DaVinci Resolve, the RTX 4080 Super was obviously the fastest out of the other NVIDIA cards that I tested. In fact, like the rendering in H.265, which is a very common video format, it was getting about 13% faster render times than the 4070 Super to the 4080 Super. And with the new AV1 format, which is going to be very popular in the near future, this was about 7% faster on the 4080 Super. Noticeably faster, but I'm not sure if that, 7 and 13% speed increases, and I'm not sure if that makes up for the 67% price increase. But the AMD cards, okay, in a surprising way, they were faster than this $1,000 4080 Super. 7800 XT was about 2% faster in H.265 and 6% faster in AV1. And this card costs half as much as the 4080 Super. I don't know what to say there. The 7900 XT, which, is $720, was 12% faster in H.265 and 9% faster in AV1. And it costs 28% less than the 4080 Super. I'm not 100% sure, at least in DaVinci Resolve, that's what I use for editing and stuff, so that's where I tested this. But I'm not 100% sure if in Resolve, the 4080 Super is actually the best value for video editors or renderers of videos or creators. It is also to mention, though, that with 40 series cards from NVIDIA, they do tend to do better with the AI type of work that is in DaVinci Resolve. So there's things like the speech to text thing that I use for like subtitles in my videos. I probably already used it in this one while I'm editing this. There's things like the magic mask features that I also use in my videos. Those are both AI deep learning trained, and NVIDIA cards do better with that compared to AMD ones. I don't know how to benchmark that. I'm actually working on how to benchmark AI. Stay tuned if you want to see some AI benchmarks and stuff like that. I also tested 3D modeling in Blender, probably the most used, or at least the most common 3D modeling program that's out there. And this is where the RTX 4080 Super really shines. Like, it's significantly faster than NVIDIA's $800 4070 Ti Super, while only costing 25% more. That is a big deal. The 7900 XT, it was faster in video rendering, but it was respectable in 3D modeling, but not nearly on the same playing field as NVIDIA's RTX 4080 Super. When you go to the 7800 XT, yeah, the AMD cards just don't do as well here. Obviously, the NVIDIA cards are cranking in this probably because of better ray tracing performance. That's good for rendering out 3D models and that type of stuff. So I also want to briefly go over the RTX 4080 Super Founders Edition. Obviously, this thing is all blacked out. It looks sick. It actually has some lights when it's going. So like this little X thing lights up And then the actual GeForce RTX logo also lights up. It looks really sick. And it's super clean. Like, it's not like this really like gamery kind of thing. It's like, it's clean, it's simple, it's timeless, I'd say, in a way. Man, I talked about this card earlier. This 4080 Super, I mean, this thing is a freaking brick because it is like edge to edge heat sink. Those are all heat fins. They don't waste any space on this card. The engineers at NVIDIA are freaking cooking with this graphics card, okay? It might surprise you, but like it looks ginormous and it feels ginormous, but it isn't actually that much bigger than a lot of the large graphics cards that I own because of this thing's sheer mass. It weighs 2 kilograms. 2! Over 5 pounds hanging off of your PCIe slot. I am pretty sure that this is actually the same cooler that's on the RTX 4090. So this thing is probably really overbuilt. And with that said, it does cool very well. In a 15-minute plus stress test, which I end up just letting run, and it just kind of goes for way longer than 15 minutes. But this card was at 63 degrees on an open air test system, okay? So it's completely fine in terms of temperatures on that. The fans were only at 1360 RPM. And from my experience, it depends on the type of fan and the cooler design, but at around 1800 RPM, that's when you can start to notice fans and they might get a little bit annoying. But obviously at 1360 RPM, way under that. So this thing was quiet. In terms of power efficiency, the total system was spitting out about 440 watts. And that includes the CPU, the fans, the drives, the lights, you know, the whole lot. And for reference, AMD's 7900 XT was at about 434 watts for the entire system, while it was outputting 15% less FPS. Yeah, the AMD card was less efficient here, but at the same time, it wasn't that much worse. NVIDIA does a better power efficiency, so I wouldn't really fuss about the power efficiency between NVIDIA or AMD when it comes down to it. But something I do want to fuss around with is this damn power cable. I hate this thing. This thing sucks. That little connector right there on this giant card is where this goes. And honestly, this adapter, it's this 3 cables. This thing is so freaking like bulky yet fragile because it's these 3 cables going to this little thing. I'm never fully sure if this is plugged in all the way. I can push on it and try to make sure it clicks, and I never know if it's all the way plugged in. And this especially scares me on the 4070 Ti Super because I have the Asus TUF model of that card. Red light is still on. I don't know what this means. To me, it is pretty much as fully seated as it can possibly be. So do you see like any gap there? It kind of looks like there's a little bit of a gap, but I can't push it any further, dude. And whenever I say like I push it so like it bends towards that side, doesn't do anything. And no matter how well I plug this thing in, the little red light comes on. And it scares the hell out of me. It's like, is my power connector not plugged in all the way? Is it gonna catch fire? Is it gonna melt or explode? We've seen these things do that. It's unlikely because of the actual wattage going through like a 4070 Ti Super. Let's go ahead and turn on the PC. And then red light goes off. Do you see that? Do you see that? Do you see that? And then when I turn on the computer, the 4070 Ti Super works perfectly fine. And that always makes me question on a card like this, like the 4080 Super, like it might not be plugged in all the way, but this one doesn't have a red light, so I don't know. I'm just like, this little power connector, this thing is making me go absolutely crazy. But this whole 12 VHP power connector thing, this is for an entirely different day. 4080 Super, the 4080 Super, the 4080 Super. That's what we're talking about today. I saw someone in the Discord say that they're hoping that this 4080 Super was gonna be like the next GTX 1080 Ti. Like, I don't know why they ever thought this was going to be, but I kind of see that hope of where they're coming from, because the RTX 4080 at its original price point was pretty awful value. I mean, $1,200, that was almost criminal how much they priced that card. And now NVIDIA basically gave it a $200 price cut, which sounds really good, but it doesn't really fix it though. And the 4080 Super is now basically what the 4080 always should have been, but this 4080 Super is coming out a year later than the 4080 should have came out at that, you know, performance and price. The question now becomes, is this $1,000 graphics card worth it? And it can be for some people. All right, I want to make that clear. It's just this card is extremely niche. Price itself is like very high to start. I mean, that already knocks a lot of people out. And I fear this is going to be the new price going forward for the 5080, the 6080, the 7080, whatever the heck they're going to call these things. The 80 class card used to be one that's a higher end performance, but is still affordable to people that did want to spend a little bit more. And now the 4080 or the 80 class card is becoming a premium, very expensive product. It's like a Titan of the past or a 90 class card of the past. And that is a new concept that is being normalized with the 4080 Super, especially now. Obviously, the 4080 Super's main advantage in gaming is 4K. 4K monitors, they also cost more. And it seems like 1440p monitors are getting more and more mainstream for a lot of people. The 4080 Super, in most cases, is complete overkill for 1440p. And you most likely be better off just buying something much cheaper, and you can still very happily enjoy your games. Unless you want to use ray tracing at 1440p. I mean, the 4080 Super is actually hitting that price premium where most RT intensive games are actually playable. The RTX 4080 Super is a surprisingly very niche graphics card. Even though Nvidia is making it cheaper by releasing the Super version here, and they want to make it more mainstream appealing by dropping that price. This card is really obviously only for those who can afford it. They have the games to use it, and also the hardware for their systems or peripherals like monitors or whatever to actually enjoy what this card is capable of. And when you add up all those costs, it gets extremely expensive. And in that niche, honestly, I don't know why a lot of people wouldn't just spring for the RTX 4090 anyways. Not that I'm encouraging you to buy an extremely expensive graphics card, but that's just the reality. That's the point we're in. This kind of leaves me interested in seeing how AMD might adjust their prices on their $1,000 graphics card, the 7900 XTX. I mean, that card is still at $950 right now. And is that going to drop as the 4080 Super launches, or do they not think the 4080 Super is that competitive? I think it's pretty competitive with that card. But I guess we're gonna have to see. I'm gonna be watching that 7900 XTX like a freaking hawk, okay? And another question I want to ask is, where do all of these RTX 4080s go? Like the original 4080s? I mean, the 4080 Super is $200 cheaper, has the same performance, same VRAM. It's just the same card, but $200 cheaper. I don't know where all these cards are gonna go. I feel like they're gonna sit on shelves for an extremely long time. And I feel bad for the retailers that had to buy these from Nvidia. And unless they're getting a rebate from Nvidia, that sucks. So yeah, that is the RTX 4080 Super, a very fast graphics card that is so fast and so expensive. It's probably extremely niche and a lot of people don't really need it. I did want to talk about this in particular though, because obviously a lot of you guys have seen on the channel, like I've been getting review samples now, which is pretty surreal. And it's honestly an honor to be in this position where I'm sent things to review that my opinion and how I validate things or test things actually matters. And that is brought to, like, this position is brought to me by you guys. And I'm just glad that you guys have enjoyed the content. That doesn't really like shape how I view the card. Obviously, I'm still looking at this completely objectively. I don't think I buy this personally. It is very fast. I'm honored to be able to use it and test it. But I don't think I would ever buy this myself. I would be something, I'd be getting like a 7800 XT if I'm being honest. That's just me. That's where I think the best value is. Let me know what you guys think about the RTX 4080 Super. Obviously, price cut on the RTX 4080 basically. But I wanted to have more in-depth conversation about how the value actually adds up and what tangible benefits do you actually get from spending this much on a graphics card, because it's not as much as you would think, okay? The price to performance is not amazing. Let me know what you think in the comments about this card below, and is like pricing on GPUs getting completely out of hand, or did this help bring it to earth? That's been it for me. You guys have a good one. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.